Hello, West Michigan. This is Tap In, and we are here today with my co host, Stephanie Kolakowski from Grow Business Today. And we have a very special guest for you. But we wanted to share with you the spirit of the show is that we want to introduce individuals, businesses, and nonprofits that can help us thrive or and ask those kind of questions that we technically ask behind closed doors. And Stephanie and I are going to ask them up front. So anyways, I want to welcome Stephanie. Nice to see you, my
Hi,
dear. All right.
nice
And
to
you're,
see you, Pam. Welcome back from vacation. It's been a while.
yeah, welcome back for you too. You look very refreshed.
Thanks.
All right. I'm going to let you do the introduction of our guest we have on today.
Absolutely. So the guest we have on today, first of all, I'm honored that he came and joined us on the show. But we go back a couple years now, and he's somebody that I look up to, and has taught me a lot in life and opened my eyes to many things. And our guest today, the list goes on and on, but Victor Williams, community advocate, leader, and CEO of the Boston Square Neighborhood Association, CEO of Grandstand Pictures, CEO and owner of the Love Movement, of the Hip Hop Coalition. I mean, this guy does so much here in Grand Rapids and really around the country, just in various different sectors. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Victor Williams to the show today. Hello.
Hello,
Hello,
Victor.
hello.
All right.
And we're here today to talk about a lot about a recent project. This is Black History Month, a very important month, and really Black history is every day, all year. But this year we have a special event and an opportunity for a community to come together, and it's around a book that I had the pleasure of reading through Leadership Grand Rapids called The Tale of Two Cities, written, of course, by Mr. Dr. Todd Robinson and Dr. Jelks. And Victor, can you a lot of our listeners, this is probably the first time hearing about the book. Can you share with us a little bit about it and about the opportunity that exists for people to tap in coming up?
Absolutely. Once again, thank you for having me on. I see my business partner, Mr. Rodney Brown, has joined us.
Yay.
The book was written by Dr. Todd Robinson in 2012. It became the Mayor's Book of the Year in 2016. And from there, I think it kind of exploded on the Grand Rapids philanthropic scene and throughout the education
Yeah. Okay.
communities. And it's been the talk of the town ever since. Author Todd Robinson explores
Yeah.
the history of the Black freedom struggle in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he coined a term called managerial racism to describe the relationship between the Black community and the power structure here in Grand Rapids throughout history. And it really hit
This way.
a chord, it
This way.
struck a chord for many throughout
Sit.
the community
Okay.
throughout the community, and it's been a hot topic ever since. And me and my comrades, sit around and we were just discussing, like, wow, like this history in this book is really important. Lots of things that we didn't know, and it'd be a shame if the youth population primarily didn't get to learn these stories as we haven't until we were grown. So we thought of ways in which to transfer this message from this book to the broader community, and we thought of no better way to do that than through film. And so we began on our trek to turn the book into a film.
Amazing. When did the project to turn the book into a film kind of start here? When did you
Um,
come up with it?
we began on this journey about 2 years ago. Yeah, so I would say summer of 2019.
Awesome. And as we know, tell us a little bit too about, can I share our story of one of our first things we worked on as a white female, you not thinking, because life is about sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And
Right.
when we do, we need to do better. And we're all come from a space of love and humanity, right? And I remember, when people hear systematic racism, if you're not familiar, it's easy for somebody to jump to a defensive mode. And we can't do that. We need to step back and listen to learn and grow. And one of my learning and growing moments was GR Summer Project, the first year with Vic. He partnered with Hip Hop Coalition to bring youth into Life Quest Church. And we were going to pick up youth to bring them to church. And we were going through a neighborhood. And this Vic was sharing with me some of his experiences. And one of the things he shared with me was a moment when his eyes were open too. And it was, he was going and doing surveying to listen to the neighborhood to find out and offer a gift card for input to Meyer for $25, which nobody would turn away. We would think, right, a $25 gift card to anything, right? We all like free gift cards. And he was knocking on doors and he went door to door and people weren't taking the survey. And he realized, well, let me try a different approach. And as he's doing the survey, he says, instead of just showing them the survey and asking them to read it, I'll read it for them. And at that moment, he realized, okay, the next person, everybody said yes after that, that there was people who couldn't read. And it wasn't that they didn't want to partake and didn't care about their community or their block. It was that they couldn't read it. And we met at the literacy, remember? We met at the celebration at the literacy table. So it was just interesting how God brings people together. And that summer was, I mean, we served and it was beautiful. The kids are amazing. Kids have such a beautiful outlook, ideas, you know, we got to surround and wrap our arms around. So this is focused in on education and teaching, but also empowering. And I love this project for that, Vic. And also Mr. Brown, Mr. Rodney Brown from GRPS, correct, sir? I see you on here. I don't see your face, but another great leader and an advocate in our community.
Thank you for having us here.
Thank you. So Pam, I had some questions from you on your end about the book and about the project.
Well, I was listening to him talk about literacy and the issue in certain communities and in schools. I mean, what impact is this going to have to kind of open up people's eyes of what is happening in the school where kids are graduating or not graduating? The graduation rate is very low because maybe they're struggling. They've been struggling for a while and nobody's put the right program for them to succeed. I had a child that had a learning disability and I had to go outside the school system to get help. So what is your role there to try to help what's going on in that situation where these kids feel like they're defeated by the time they graduate because they don't have the skills to compete?
Yeah. Hey, let me offer something there again. Thank you for having us here. And literacy is as much a context of culture as well. And one of the things that this book has done, one of the things that our story as we tell it will do, is to bring about what we see as cultural literacy in this community. And, you know, there's an old adage of that unless you learn from your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And so the clear issues of managerial racism that Dr. Todd Robinson describes in his book speaks to every institution practically in this community. And if we start with talking about the disparity right now that exists in every system as it relates to issues of race, equity, and diversity and inclusion, we can truly take it back to the history that was uncovered in the book that Dr. Robinson wrote that speaks to those inequities and how they were established and perpetuated here in Grand Rapids. So in terms of the culture of Grand Rapids, we are grateful that folks from the community, throughout the community, have been moved and motivated by this book. Amazingly, it's the second book in Grand Rapids about the African-American community and the struggle to overcome, as Todd talks about it, the Black freedom struggle, or as Dr. Randall Jelks in his book, African Americans in the Furniture City, the struggle for civil rights in Grand Rapids. We have two awesome texts from professional PhD level college instructors that saw something happening here in Grand Rapids, Michigan that needs to be explored. So, I didn't try to spin your question, just want to bring greater context to it, that uncovering the history of the insidiousness of institutional racism and managerial racism in Grand Rapids, and the fact that we have folks on board who are saying, particularly in the white community, who are saying, we want to acknowledge ways that we helped to perpetuate institutional and or managerial racism in Grand Rapids, and we want to support this project in order for us to tell the story so that we don't repeat history. Lastly, we all, Stephanie, we've even talked about this before. When you see the Forbes report of 2015, 16, whenever that was, that says Grand Rapids, Michigan is the second worst community from the bottom of 52 communities for Black economic progress, Black opportunity, anything that related to Black and African American community. And so we just don't believe that that is something that happened by happenstance. That didn't happen just because, the Black community does not have ambition. The Black community does not have the struggle within them to overcome, does not have the persistence. In fact, the book identifies some great leaders within the Black community that we see some of their names on the walls here in Grand Rapids. Paul I. Phillips is one, a historic leader that this community embraced. Helen Clater is another. Robert Clater, her husband. Tremendous historical evidence about the work that they put in. And what we say and see is that the system, in order to maintain a position of power and privilege relative to issues of race, equity, diversity, inclusion, and how resources and opportunities are moved in this community, we recognize that the system shapeshifts. That's a word that we've used, that the system shapeshifts. So we've had advocates who have advocated within this book even for educational equity, one way or the other. There's some incredible stories about that in Todd's book. But in addition to that, issues around redlining, issues around where our city government, through the first Black mayor in Grand Rapids, through an alliance with the business community here in town again, showed a shape shift that it didn't matter what at that point. And we're not victims. We're not going to play victims. We're not going to be victims in this community any longer. We're going to tell our stories about what we've overcome, how we continue to overcome, how we continue to organize, and that it's the system itself is not being as responsive as we need it to be.
Absolutely. And we have so many tremendous leaders, Black and brown leaders in this community, and people from historically who have come, just like Dr. Jobs, Dr. Robinson, who have done amazing things, sports, Mayweather, Don Carey, the list goes on. And what I love, we do need to amplify voices, but not only amplify voices, put leadership in the forefront. And you guys have done a tremendous job, and I have mad respect. And I will be the first one to say that 2 years ago, until I started the process, I had no idea. And there is, where the Black and brown community has been living this for a long time, coming and not recognizing until you're in it, the privilege. You hear white privilege and you automatically, as a white person, without understanding racial inequity or understanding history, which we don't learn a ton in school of Black history, just like we don't learn a lot about military history. And we need to learn both more in school. So it's not just on Veterans Day month that you're learning about military heroes, or in February, African Americans. There's so many, and we don't have those voices, and we don't have those people's pictures or names on buildings. And when we look at the problem, you look at Third Ward, and redlining really did start, and it hasn't gotten much better, even though we have commissioners representing in Third Ward as well, or doing the best they can as far as funding that's coming in to Third Ward, that's making up for that inequity and that level of dollars and cents, to make it so equitable access to financial capital and resources to invest more in schools, invest more in families, invest in communities, invest in business, Black and brown led business, so we can do that. And I think it's a huge systematic thing that when somebody from the outside, and I'm saying this because I know we'll have people listening who aren't familiar with the history, which is why I wanted to have you guys on today, because this project is a super important one and it's something we need to talk about more. I just want to kind of put that out there, that can we identify for a minute and talk a little bit about how redlining really impacted. And when you're talking and you're sharing the story about, you know, Third Ward and about some of the things that happened, not because people went out to intentionally be racist people. That's not what it is. It's a systematic decision making that didn't include Black and brown voices or people from diverse communities, or even Republicans and Democrats. I have friends both, right, that all agree the system failed back in the 50s and 40s with how things were done. Republican and Democrat have said that.
You know, Stephanie, if I can just interject even there too, is that institutional racism, managerial racism, the insidiousness of racism in and of itself does have good people caught up in the system. Let's be clear here.
Yes.
There are good people who are caught up in bad systems of racism, and they don't know how to get out of it. And so that transcends race, gender, and geography. And this is why, again, it's so significant that we can look at the historic and textual evidence that is supported by research. And most of this information, quite frankly, that Dr. Robinson curried, as well as Dr. Jelks, is at our Grand Rapids Public Library, or at the Bentley Library, or at our Grand Rapids Public Museum. So the history is there. So we need to tell the stories that we speak of. And if we want to, again, to the point that you're making, Stephanie, around the inequities based upon the geographic context of Grand Rapids, and you look at the major stories that came out last year in response, or the last couple of years, to the point you made about inequity of funding within our wards. And it just so happens that the majority of African Americans, just like redlining from the 50s and the 60s, happen to live in the ward that has a tremendous less amount of funding. And we come around by saying, well, it's because, we did Michigan Mile. It's because we did, the development over on, what street is that, Vic?
Wealthy.
Well, certainly Wealthy fits in second, third, but
Bridge.
Yeah, Bridge Street. It's because we're going down Bridge Street. We have multiple business corridors within Southeast Grand Rapids whereby we could just have, and we're seeing it happening some now in terms of a renewed interest, and frankly, it just comes down because we don't have much more land to develop in the city of Grand Rapids relative to that. So we might as well go into Southeast Grand Rapids as well and look at the corridor development there. But it is, again, not happening by happenstance. There's no coincidence, frankly, in some of the outcomes that we see. We're going to continue to organize in real time in this community, utilizing this text that the community, both white, Black, brown, and other, whoever other is, has embraced. So again, thank you so much for having us here on the show. I'd be happy personally to answer any other question you have.
You're amazing. Do you want me to go, Pam?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I would like to compliment some of our different groups, and I'm going to point out some groups like, I'm going to point out LGR Grand Rapids. I'm going to point out the Grand Rapids Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber. I'm going to point out, of course, Jamel Robinson and all of the work that he's doing. I'm going to point out all the work that you both are doing. Is though in our community, like the white community, leadership that comes into the city, making sure the history and that this book that your project is on is a required read. And it shouldn't be required, it should be a want to read. And I think that it opens eyes in literature, and I'm very happy to see the library sponsoring and looking for other avenues to include, our history into our communities, because I think that is an important aspect of leadership, is to have some understanding so we can make better informed decisions. And also, no matter who's at the table, there's at least empathy and knowledge Because if you don't even know, if you don't read this book, if you don't understand the history of Grand Rapids or why different groups or people or humans feel the way that they do because of action, then we're never going to move forward. And I think a great thing that's going on now is projects like you guys are doing, and people who are as passionate as we all are about, one, this is our home, this is our city. Our kids are our future, and our kids' voices and talents need to be recognized, and they need to have what they need to lead that next generation. So I guess my question to you is, how do we continue to advocate, support, and do more projects like these, and to, for Black history, not just in the month of February, but all through the year? And what can we do as partners and community leaders, and just people and humans in general who care and want to live in the best place possible and want everybody to have the same opportunities? What can we do? What can Pam and I do?
Now, I thought Vic would speak to this idea of that, again, not repeating history, and that, our friends, our allies, our partners, those who want to see something differently done in this community, respecting that, to be clear, we love Grand Rapids. Let's just be clear here.
Yeah.
We are doing this in the interest of our community. But here's one of the things that we all can do. The fact is that you can't be what you can't see. So even back towards this idea of, where systems even has failed, where systems have failed because we've not promoted and acknowledged all of the folks, Black, brown, and other, in this community that has come before our young people who are engaged today. Just tremendous stories that we've uncovered through our research on top of what Dr. Robinson had explored. Like, for example, I'll just say for downtown Grand Rapids, one of the most significant figures in this book is a person who was born and raised in Grand Rapids. Dr. Emmett Bolden is his name. Dr. Emmett Bolden came back to Grand Rapids, having left Grand Rapids, went to Howard University, came back to Grand Rapids as a dentist. He was a star athlete, Stephanie. We know you love the sports. He's a star athlete, early 1900s, leave this community. He comes back. It was segregation at the time. There was a theater right at the corner of Lion and Vic, what's that street, Lion and Pearl, maybe, called the Keith Theater. Yes. The Keith Theater, organized by and operated by the Grand Rapids Operating Company. Do you know they actually had a plaque there? I know they're doing a rebuild maybe on that building, but there's a plaque at that corner acknowledging that a Black man, Dr. Emmett Bolden, challenged the segregated seating at that theater because when they went into the theater, they said, and I won't use the N-word, but N-word, sit up there. You don't sit down here in front. So in a cadre of other Black professional men who had left this community, came back with college degrees, challenged the infrastructure of segregation in this community, and eventually won. The Supreme Court actually said, yeah, segregation applies to the Brown versus Board of Education decision. Sure, I'm passionate about that because I'm from Grand Rapids. And then often I also acknowledge that people need to hear that story. And so when you deal with not having authentic voice, Stephanie, I know you're big on that, authentic voice, and through your work, I know that you speak to it, but not having authentic voice and not speaking to the indigenous community that is born and raised from Grand Rapids, like Mr. Williams and myself, that when you don't get those stories, it's like a perpetuated, systematic, control of the narrative. And towards that end, we think that we have an opportunity to reframe the narrative in Grand Rapids in the interest of the entire community. Some of those organizations and individuals that you mentioned, Stephanie, are partners with us, if you will, have encouraged us and are offering opportunities to engage with us directly. And so we're excited about that.
Okay, so Stephanie, we are at our time. So
Yeah.
ask them the last question like you always do.
Okay, so two things. The first one is what can we expect? So we just want to do again, February 24th, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. and it's an hour and 30 minutes and it's Zoom. So go ahead and tell us where we can tap in and find the information so we can make sure that we share it and we have people that can be involved and hear what this project's all about firsthand.
Well, people can always tap in stuff through our grandstand pictures pages across all social networks.
Okay.
And they can also tap in at grpo.org. They will be hosting the event via their Zoom and YouTube. So people will be able to tap into the Grand Rapids Public Library access on that day as well.
Awesome.
Oh,
and then tickets are free, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And this
Yes.
is a virtual event, correct?
This is a virtual community conversation, and we welcome everyone to be a part of it. Come out. We will be joined by Dr. Arthur Todd Robinson, Dr. Arthur Randall Jokes, and community elder and historian Talib El-Amin.
Awesome.
Okay,
well,
great.
We're excited, and we appreciate you guys being a guest on the show. And thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your wisdom and taking the time to share with us today. And we look forward to the event.
All right, thank you, West Michigan. We will catch you next time on, this is Pamela Kime from Grand Tap Media. Stephanie Kolakowski is my co-host. We will catch you next time on Tap In West Michigan. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
All right.